So when we talk about succession, oftentimes we talk about the microenvironment. So macro means like the general climate, the general amount of water and rainfall, but we have microclimates, microenvironments, like for example, in a desert, like the microenvironment underneath a rock or the microclimate underneath a bush. It differs dramatically from, say, for example, just the general climate at a large scale. So this generally refers to small scale conditions that include temperature, humidity, and light. So this is temperature, humidity, and light. A good example of this is actually when you put a road through a forest. The road and that clearing of that path creates a very different microclimate right next to it than would be if the whole forest was intact. So you put a road through a forest and you get a lot more light, you get a lot more drying out, so the humidity is lower, right? And it actually also might be, temperature might be higher because of that change in the microclimate. So this is important because this actually, when we disturb an area, we get changes in the microclimate that are significant and actually tell us what types of plants are going to be more successful in early stages of succession. So we can talk about the early successional species. They tend to find bare soil. So they tend to also be called pioneer species. There is a type of succession that even exists where we have destroyed the soil and we just have rock. But we're just talking about here the species if we just remove all the plants and we have bare soil. So they find bare soil and they grow and they reproduce quickly. So like weedy species do. When we talk about late successional species, they might have tend to have very different climates, microclimates. And so they generally face more competition for space. So they must compete for space. And they also allocate more energy to growth, storage, and defense rather than reproduction. Defense might even be a mechanism by which plants compete. So some plants actually produce toxins and they actually prevent the growth of other plants around them. So when you see like a plant come up and it kills the other plants around it, that is probably a chemical that they're releasing that is allowing them to compete for access to that space. So if we look at a diagram of this, we can see, again, this is in a grassland ecosystem. You can see that what happens when you have this early levels of succession where you have lots of light. So if we have lots of light, then we see that the biomass of these early like quackgrass and bent grass, that is high. So they are like reproducing really quickly. And then as we start to decrease the amount of light because of shading of the change in the microclimate, we see that the above ground biomass actually increases. So they're putting it into growth with the little blue stem right here and the big blue stem, but they don't have as much light, but they're actually creating more growth with that light in order to compete for access. So this is tends to be a pattern. Early successional plants and animals, so invasive species, for example, and then late successional plants and animals.